Today is Wednesday, November 2nd, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. The greatest challenge in the work that needs to be done to restore classical Catholic education is always staying focused on the goal, which is to restore the contemplative culture that was known not just throughout Catholic history, but even through pre-Christian history in philosophical circles. To maintain the goal of restoring that contemplative culture, never wavering from that goal, but at the same time working in a sustainable way to continue moving forward in the pursuit of that goal. And that work of maintaining sustainability is the challenging work that I think the success of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy is going to come down to. I really believe that the ability to persevere in staying focused on the true goal and understanding that everything has to be done in a sustainable way is the great challenge that the Classical Liberal Arts Academy faces day by day, hour by hour. There are so many sources of pressure on the work that's being done in the Academy. There's so much pressure from different influences. There are people who want so badly for the Classical Liberal Arts Academy to be something that serves their family in a certain way that they want it to serve it, that is not concerned with the goal and is not sustainable. And many of these families would throw thousands and thousands of dollars at the Classical Liberal Arts Academy if it would do this or do this. And if it did that, if it simply took the money and allowed a few highly influential families to use it for their own private benefit, it wouldn't serve the true goal, and it would ultimately fail. Because when institutions allow themselves to become dependent on a small number of wealthy individuals, as soon as those individuals move on, the institution falls apart. And then usually, because the institution hasn't been established on sustainable grounds, it turns to all kinds of crazy fundraising efforts to try to preserve itself. And that's why such resistance needs to be maintained, to not allow wealthy, influential individuals to take control. And I'm not saying that they're bad, but they're thinking about their own personal needs and interests, and they have resources to get the service that they need, or to try to at least. But serving them in exchange for that money will not bring about the true goal, will not bring about long-term success in restoring classical and Catholic contemplative culture. And that pressure needs to be constantly resisted, especially when finances get tight. It becomes especially tempting to listen to those voices when finances get tight, But we have to stay focused on the goal and think about long-term sustainability and make good long-term decisions. And it's very difficult. The other pressure comes from the majority of families who are simply looking for a cheap program and would like it to provide them with a modern education, but cheaper than the other programs. And so because in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we're always trying to keep prices as low as possible, because in order to restore contemplative culture, there can't be great financial burdens laid upon students. So we're always working to figure out how to do everything as affordably as possible, everything essential. And there are many families who come into the academy, and the only thing that attracts them is that it's cheaper than other programs. And what they want to do is they want to use the Classical Liberal Arts Academy to replace the public school or to replace Seton homeschool and try to get their modern education for less money than the local Catholic school or the local public school or Seton homeschool would cost them. They come into the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, they ignore all of the information about the history of the Classical Liberal Arts, they ignore all curriculum discussions, the whole curriculum page that explains the 7 liberal arts, classical philosophy, scholastic theology. They ignore all of that, and they look at modern mathematics, modern natural sciences, modern language arts, and they try to force us to give all of our attention to those modern subjects, because they want us to give them a cheap, modern education. They see us as a way to save money. And this is the other great influence that has to constantly be resisted. Because you could make a lot of money doing that, because it's easy to find large numbers of students who just want a high school diploma or grade level school requirements. It's easy to find hundreds, even thousands of students for such a program if you simply make it cheaper, because they're just bargain hunting. So these influences from both sides, from the very wealthy individuals who may support the mission and say, yes, we want our kids to have this contemplative Catholic education. We want you to do this and this with our kids. We want you to do this and this. We're willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars if you'll do this and this. And again, one could make a living doing just that, but it's short-sighted and it neglects the whole goal. It neglects the goal. And so the constant fight that I have to wage in managing the Classical Liberal Arts Academy is staying focused on the goal, which is to restore classical Catholic contemplative culture, and do so in a sustainable way. That's the challenge. And in our historical context, there's no precedent. There's nowhere I can look for prudence, because circumstances are so different from anything that existed in history. And so the only way that I can look back and seek direction is to do so by analogies, looking at what movements in the past, like the Jesuit school movement in the 1500s, looking at what they did and considering how the circumstances differ today and how the methods and practices the Jesuits employed, which were wise, how they would translate to something based on what's available in our society. You throw in the internet, you throw in access to modern resources, you throw in all these different tools and benefits we have, and that analogy is very complicated. It's easy to say, well, just use the computer to do this and this, and set a website up that does this, and a database to do this. Yeah, well, who's going to do all that work? If you're hiring programmers, and sustainability is out the window. So it's got to be work that can be done without multiplying salaries and making the program impossible for anyone to afford. I mean, that's what the private schools are already doing. They just decide what they want to do, stick a tuition label on it, and tough luck, everybody. Your local Catholic school now costs $10,000 a year per student. Have a nice time educating your 6 kids. There's no real plan for the actual students and families. It would be easy just to think about what the ideal would be, with no regard for sustainability. So there's wheels within wheels with all these things. And that's really the challenge. That's really the challenge. When I talk to people who express a zeal for our mission, as soon as we start to talk about those real life limiting factors, all of the interest in collaborating or helping or work together disappear. But that's the challenge that we face in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, to stay focused on that goal, which I'm going to do, and to do so in a way that is sustainable and will actually allow us to achieve that goal long term. And there are many problems, there are many unfortunate hindrances. And part of them are the fault of the people who set themselves up as teachers. And part of the problem is that parents are indiscriminate in the implications or the effects of things that they choose to do. For example, funding the restoration of the classical Catholic curriculum is very challenging, because we have to do the work of teaching the subjects that no one wants to teach. We have to do the hard work of teaching the classical languages. We have to do the hard work of teaching the 7 liberal arts. We have to do the work of teaching the classical philosophy and the theology works. We have to do that hard work. And others are not willing to do those tasks. They're not willing to teach those subjects because it's very difficult and it's not lucrative. You're not going to make money teaching Aristotle's reasoning. You're not going to make money teaching Latin syntax. And so people who are in education to make money, they're not going to do those things. So those difficult works, the most difficult works, are left to us. We're the ones who have to teach the classical languages. We're the ones who have to study and order and explain Aristotle's Organon. We're the ones who have to organize the classical metaphysics course and so on, classical mathematics. And because so few students are interested in those subjects, so few parents are willing to pay for those subjects, funding is very difficult. And that work has to be done at great personal cost for the sake of the goal. Now, if parents were considerate, they would give us the opportunity to earn pay for the simple things that need to be done, so that that pay would fund the more difficult work. But they don't do this. So what they'll do is they'll go find another program who does nothing but teach the easy stuff, and they'll send all their money to those programs. Those programs just pocket that money and have no interest in investing in the difficult work or undertaking the difficult work. So all of the simple stuff, the handwriting courses, the elementary math and language arts courses, all of the elementary stuff, all of the easy stuff, instead of having that money invested in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy with a long-term vision, the parents will spend that money on other programs, and those programs will offer them nothing when the kids get older. And all of that investment is simply scattered to the wind. And that's one of the things that makes this work so difficult, is that it has to be self-funded. So many hours of unpaid labor are necessary in order to accomplish the goal. And that's, like I said, that's partly the fault of those who set themselves up as teachers with no interest in actually restoring classical Catholic contemplative culture, but it also is partly the fault of parents who are short-sighted and don't understand the importance of their elementary expenses in education on the long-term goals of what's available for their children later on. And so that's sort of this dilemma that's built into this project. But thanks be to God, we've been able to maintain this work for going on 15 years. And we have enough to keep going. And thankfully, I love the classical Catholic studies, and am content with my own contemplative life to work on these projects happily. So the work goes on. But these are the real world limiting factors and how things hinder the work from being done. Things which appear innocent on the surface. Like someone might ask, why would you criticize another publishing company that's publishing Christian stuff? Why would you be critical? And the reason is because you have to understand what they're actually doing, what they're choosing to not work on, and how they're simply hoarding all of this elementary education money and putting it in the bank instead of investing it in the restoration of real Catholic learning. They're simply taking all the easy money and pocketing it. That's what upsets me. But they wouldn't be able to do that if the parents were more thoughtful. and a little more noble-minded to think about what's going to be done when the kids are 17. And homeschooling, the homeschool community is dominated by parents with young children, with preschool and elementary age children. And the homeschool businessmen have simply targeted that crowd as their market. And so homeschooling is very strong for ages 5 through 10, and then it falls apart in the high school years. And that's because of those programs that hoard all the money invested in the elementary years and don't invest it all in the development of a more mature, contemplative educational program, because they don't want to do the hard work. They leave that for the Classical Liberal Arts Academy to take care of. And we have to do it with little to no funding. So those are the real world challenges. And I'm happy to bear that challenge. I find it to be a great sport. It's a great contest. And I love it. So we're able to keep working on it. The real challenge, though, for me as a teacher is focusing on teaching the children how to study in a sustainable way. This is another problem. It's not enough to study. It's not enough to learn certain subjects. Students have to learn how to study in a sustainable way, because there's so much that needs to be studied and learned. And if you pursue learning in an expensive way, you're simply not going to be able to make much progress. You have to learn how to study in an efficient way. And modern parents just don't understand this. Modern parents think that we should just try to make the lessons as easy for the kids to understand as possible. And this is all just short-sighted thinking. Usually because the parents haven't studied the subjects themselves and they don't understand how much there is to study for Catholic kids to have the education that Catholic saints had in the past. They don't understand how much there is to learn. And so they set up all kinds of unsustainable, expensive methods of learning that are fine as long as you focus on modern education standards, which are barely literate. But as soon as you begin to pursue the studies necessary for a classical Catholic contemplative life, the modern methods are simply too expensive, too inefficient, and that makes them unsustainable. And this is what I am always trying to explain to parents, that the way that they want their children to be taught is not sustainable. It's not going to work. It may bring about some short-term results in elementary school, but it's not going to be successful long-term. The kids have to learn to study and learn by efficient, simple means. They have to learn to read from digital texts because it's free. There's no limit to the content of their studies. And we'll have people complain, say, oh, I don't like reading digital text because when I read them, they make my eyes hurt. Well, you know what? Playing football made my body hurt. Exercising makes my joints hurt. Fasting sometimes gives me headaches. Staying up through the night and studying rather than going to bed makes my throat hurt, makes my eyes burn. That's part of the challenge. It's difficult. But that's what it takes. We can't allow personal comfort and the Epicurean desire to avoid pain to guide our life, because that's not how the Christian life needs to be lived. The sacrifice of study is the virtue of study. It's work. It's not leisure, it's not play, it's not rest. Study is a species of work. And it needs to be undertaken as work. In business, a business owner can only do things in a way that leads to a profit. There are a million ways to run a business. Everybody thinks that they're smarter than the business owner, but they can't explain how there would be a profit at the end of the day. The whole challenge of business ownership is to do something and come out with a profit in the end. A sustainable profit. That's the challenge. And the same thing is true with education and study. Anybody can get through a lesson with all kinds of expensive bells and whistles and multimedia presentations and all the craziness of modern schooling, but you're only going to get through so many lessons. It's like the tip of the iceberg. You've already spent all of your time and money just to get the tip of the iceberg. And the body of the iceberg is left untouched. But modern parents think that making education easy, making the learning easy, whatever is the easiest, is the best. They imagine that the teacher that can make teaching this lesson the easiest is the best teacher, but they don't have a long-term mindset. And so they end up with highly educated second graders who end up being dumb 10th graders because they have no plan for the future. And as the body of learning increases exponentially as the kids get older, there's simply no plan for how the student is going to process that content, because the methods of study have been so inefficient and expensive. There's just no way to do it. And so the child's education stops. And the child then settles into the minimum requirement secular education, which is where almost all of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy kids end up anyway. They end up barely checking off the minimum secular requirements because they haven't listened when I've explained to them that you have to learn to study in a certain way or you're not going to be able to progress. You have to be willing to learn to study in a certain way, or your way is going to be too inefficient to allow you to progress. You could say, well, there are different learning styles. No, there are not. The reality is that there are not different learning styles. There are students who are capable of learning long term and students who are not. The learning styles, the so-called learning styles of the students will determine whether they will be able to progress or not. And we have to learn the right way, or we're not going to be able to learn. And so we see what the parents are doing, what the schools are doing. It's just short-sighted and not realistic. And that's what happens. Like I said, we have a population of amazing elementary school students who all become dumb high school students, barely getting minimum requirements done because their parents have bought into this idea that whatever makes learning easy is good. But it's not efficient enough to continue making progress. And so in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, I'm constantly working to resist the demands and the pressure and the pleading to do this and do that and make videos and do this and if the kids just had... Look, if the kids have videos, we can get through this lesson, that lesson, this lesson, but I'm not going to make videos for every subject in every lesson. So what's going to happen when the kids reach the end of the videos and they're capable of moving through videos faster than I'm capable of producing? They're going to be done. They're not going to be able to progress because they've been made dependent on these videos instead of learning how to study in an efficient way. And I lose tons of students because their parents don't want them to learn the way that I tell them to learn. And they're going to go find another program where the program promises to give them all kinds of helps and bells and whistles and services and this and that. And it all looks great short term. So these are the challenges. And I think it's helpful for me to talk about them because often I feel like parents may get frustrated because they don't understand why I do the things I do or why I make the decisions I make. I try to be as helpful as possible, but at the same time, I'm not going to sacrifice goals. I'm not going to sacrifice sustainability. I'm not going to settle for a quick buck. I'm not going to accept a short-term financial windfall at the expense of the long-term mission. And I've got to constantly make sure that what we're doing is right. And that's what makes the Classical Liberal Arts Academy so different, and what I believe in the long term is going to actually make us successful. We're the only program that introduces students to the primary source materials and leads them to study every line of those materials. We don't make anthologies, we don't make summaries. I don't give the kids synopses of what the book says. They don't simply listen to my video and spit back the key points that I made for credit. They study the primary sources. We're all accountable to every word of the primary sources. That's real learning. That's restoring classical studies. That's what gives the students the sense that their studies are important. Not that you merely need to listen to the teacher and repeat what he says to get your credits, but that what he says is accountable to what the text says, and if you're willing to read it more carefully and study it more carefully, you might be wiser than the teacher. You might be able to correct the teacher's errors, because that's what it takes to be the best teacher, to be the best student, to master these sciences. It takes diligent reading of every word, every line, and making sure that everything you think and say is supported by everything else you read throughout the curriculum. That's the real challenge of learning, and that's where future great teachers are going to come from. When people contact me and ask me if I'm hiring or looking for any teaching help, I can only laugh, because these people with their college degrees and school teaching experience and whatever else they have on their resume, they're not as bright as the students that I work with. I have students who would be the best teachers. If I was going to hire a teacher, I can name students that I work with who would be the best teachers. And I know they would be the best teachers because I know that they study and master the material. And these people asking for jobs, they've never even studied the content of our curriculum, but they don't care. They're just looking for a job. They'll figure out how to say whatever they need to say to burn a class hour with some kids. And that's what's wrong with modern education. It's just a business, a career opportunity for adults, rather than a mission to actually serve the students and ultimately to serve God. So these are the challenging factors that we have to deal with day by day. And the good news is, where we're at right now, the Academy's in a really good place. Financially, we're in a good place. As far as the development of the curriculum, we're in a good place. Our system and the way that it's arranged right now, all of those logistical things, we're in a good place. Everything's in a good place. My daily work with students is good because it puts a lot of pressure on me to continue to develop the curriculum and prepare the lessons and edit things and clean things up. I'm under a lot of pressure every day. Parents probably don't realize how much pressure there is in, let's just say, my meetings with the students every day. I meet from 10 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock p.m. non-stop for scheduled meetings with students, and every one of those meetings is a different kid, different age, different subjects, different courses, different needs, and everything's got to be ready for all of these different students. It puts a very great amount of pressure on me, and that pressure is good for the development of the program. My wife is working with me full time at the same time, just constantly working to improve things and develop things and make sure the next lesson's ready for every student, make sure their assignments are graded. It's very high pressure work from 10 to 5 every day. And then as soon as the meetings are over, I get out here for a walk and just breathe and calm down. And then I settle down for the night and take care of all the tasks that came up in my conversations with the kids throughout the day. So everything right now, we've spent so much time over the years experimenting with things, changing things, trying to figure out how we could get ourselves into a position where we could really dig in and invest for a long period of time. And we just didn't have the solutions, where I feel like where we're at right now, I feel like we've got things figured out and everything is stable. And now it's just a matter of time to work month after month after month, year after year, to fill out this whole curriculum and restore this whole system of education, and then just keep going through it in waves and improving things. If you know how plants grow, even how the body grows, there's primary and secondary growth. We're really in primary growth still, just filling out vertically, as it were. And we're getting to a point where we're beginning to start with that secondary growth where we start to thicken up and fill out. And there are certain places in the curriculum where you can see that happening, and that's where we can really see the program moving into the next phase. And I just feel really confident, really satisfied with where things are right now, and I just feel the program filling out quickly, day by day, as I work with the students. So I feel like everything is in a good place, but it's cost us a lot to get to this point. We've disappointed a lot of people, and there's nothing else we could do. We have to continue to focus on the goal. School relationships are temporary anyway. That's just how education is. The relationships between teachers and parents are always temporary. And so I have to ignore the temptation to get entangled personally with parents or students, because parents and students are going to come and go. I've got to stay focused on the mission and keep things impersonal. And sometimes I've got to be willing to let good families go, because there's just no way for us to serve them at the present time in a sustainable way. And we've had to do that time and again over the last 15 years. But like I said, as painful as that was at times, I feel like things are in a very good place right now, and they wouldn't be as they are if we hadn't done that. And so this is the challenge we face in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. If you're listening to this as a parent or maybe even as a student, I hope that helps you to understand the challenges from my perspective a little bit, and gives you some insight into why I do things the way that I do, and when I do things, why I do them, what my thoughts are, what my concerns are, what my limitations are, what my obstacles are, what my challenges are, so that you can understand and hopefully participate in this project in a meaningful way, because there's lots of work to do and we all have a role to play. Anyone who shares in the mission of restoring classical Catholic contemplative culture, anyone who yearns for that restoration, has a role to play. And for some people, just studying in the program is their role. And so I hope that helps you to understand what we're doing and how it has to be done. If you've got questions about these things, I ask that you not take guesses as to what's going on, but just ask. I'm happy to talk about what's going on behind the scenes, and I would like for parents and students to understand. So if there's something you're not sure about, or you don't understand why I would do this and not do this, or why I'm not responding when you ask me for this, just ask, because I'll explain it. It's always practical. It's never personal. It's always practical based on these two factors, the long-term goal of restoring classical Catholic contemplative culture, and doing so in a way that's sustainable, that will actually allow us to achieve that long term. So I hope that's a helpful little peek behind the scenes. God bless.